What's the worst parenting you've witnessed in public? A woman smacked her child multiple times for going to pick up a McDonald's order from the counter. Because it wasn't their order. It got really awkward when it became clear that it was in fact their order. A little girl walking with her dad stopped to rummage through some dandelions. The dad kept walking while she yelled at him to wait. She picked a dandelion and ran over to him to give it to him. He tossed it to the side and told her to stop ducking around. Some years ago I used to live above a trashy single mother in a 3-apartment house. One Saturday night around 2 AM there was a knock on my door and the 4-year-old daughter from downstairs stood in front of me crying asking if I knew where her mother was. Wet PJ and dirty bare feet from searching her mom outside in the garden. That itch went out partying as soon as the child was asleep and left her totally alone. She can consider herself lucky that the cops I called arrived before she did. Parents who try to continue their pre-kid party life with their babies in tow. I went to college in the archetypal college town, which means a street dedicated mostly to college bars. My friends and I would do bar crawls, and would always end the night at this one pub. Anyway, on this particular occasion, it gets to be that time of night and we take our table and start talking. I'm telling a story where I happen to say the word duck. The couple next to me turns to me and angrily says, "Hey, watch your mouth, lady. There's a child here." And for about 2 seconds, I felt horrible. Until I realized they were the ones with a 3-year-old in a college bar at 11:45 at night. My niece's birthday party. She has a little brother and sister. Little sister gets a balloon ribbon wrapped around her neck. And her father casually glanced over, took note of the situation, then went back to looking at his phone. I had to pull out my pocket knife to get the ribbon off the kid while she cried. Same kids. Different story. It's Thanksgiving and something is burning. Smoke starts filling the house and the little ones start coughing. Nobody moved. So I snatched them up and took them outside. FFS. I don't have kids because I'm not responsible enough. But people who have kids to just be irresponsible with the lives of their children per me write the duck off. 2 young kids playing within earshot of their mother. One kid says to the other, "I'm gonna kill you." The mother yells over, "If you say something like that again I'll break your neck." My parents used to let me scream bloody murder in movie theaters because it's a natural form of human expression. Sorry to anyone I inconvenienced. You never duck in, listen to me. You duck in, brat. Gosh. When you speak to your child with such respect, I can't imagine why they'd ever start tuning you out. My friend saw a mother sitting on their child as punishment. He didn't know for what. It was a young child. And she was pretty overweight as well. Strange things happen on public buses. A woman got arrested where my mom works for doing that. She tackled her son to the ground and sat on him while he was screaming. I think my mom later learned that the boy was actually autistic. It made me so sad. My least favorite thing is watching parents insult and talk badly about people in front of their kids. It ingrains in them that being nasty is okay. And that fosters terrible behavior in the future. Divorced parents talking crap to their ex in front of the kids. I overheard my sister do this once. My niece asked her if she could sign up for cheerleading. She told her, "I already said you can't sign up for anything that costs money until your dad gets caught up on child support." She probably thought the kid would blame her dad. I hope she was smart enough to see through the BS and realize she was being used as a pawn. My sister is financially well off. BTW. Money was not the issue. I was on a train home. A mother was sitting with her son, maybe 6-7 years old, at the front of a nearly full, silent car. He had peed his pants. For 45 minutes. We all had to witness her berating this kid. And doing it very loudly. Saying shit like, "This is why I don't like to take anywhere with me, you're an embarrassment to me. Everyone here knows what you did. Yada yada yada." Poor kid was crying. She was ducking, yelling shit like this for the whole ride. It was absolutely ridiculous. I felt so ducking bad for him. Finally, A man sitting near the back of the car spoke up. Said something like, "Mom, please stop yelling at him. You are making us all very uncomfortable." She grabbed the kid's arm and stormed off at the next stop. I really hope he's okay. I work in pharmacy, and we regularly sell packs of syringes without prescriptions to people claiming to need them for a sick pet relative etc. Regardless of whether that's true or they're using them to shoot up drugs, our policy is to sell them for the sake of harm reduction. Because we'd rather addicts use clean needles than reuse dirty ones and spread diseases. We had a lady who used to always come in with her two adorable little girls to buy syringes for their diabetic dog. At first she was believable. She had her sheet together and her kids seemed well taken care of. But after a while it became obvious she was actually using and her addiction was getting bad. Her kids were obviously dirty. The older one, who was maybe 6 years old, went from happy and talkative to withdrawn and sad looking. And the mom eventually stopped trying to cover up her open sores and track marks. I approached my boss with my concerns. As a mother myself, I really did not feel comfortable selling to her with her kids right there. And he basically told me to either suck it up or have one of the other techs on duty sell to her. Because it's corporate policy and a $3 pack of syringes is apparently still an important profit for the company. The last time I saw her come in, she had open sores on her face and track marks up both arms. The older kid had on a filthy stained dress and her hair was an unkempt rat's nest. And the baby had a bad rash on her arms and face, and her shoes were obviously too small and held on with duct tape. I really wish I'd gotten her address off of her ID so I could make an anonymous call and report her to CPS so she could get some sort of help, or at least have the kids placed somewhere safe where they don't have to watch their mom shoot up. Some asshole father showed up to my work and put his 2-year-old son in a cart. He pushed this kid around for like 15 minutes or so, and the whole time the kid was screaming and yelling and throwing fits. Typical 2-year-old shit. Until this guy finally had it and decided to twist the cart super fast. I was horrified as his son fell out of the cart and landed directly on his head. The kid's head made this loud crack on impact but suddenly stopped crying. A minute later the kid freaked out, completely screaming with everything he had. I had the floor manager call 911 immediately and told the man not to move his son. An off-duty firefighter ran over and started first aid. When I told everyone what I had witnessed, many of the staff working that day became teary-eyed, thinking this kid has to live with such an evil bastard of a father. When the paramedics came, I pulled one of them aside and gave my statement, letting them know that they needed to call CPS. This was in Ontario. The father looked like he felt like shit, but he also looked more worried about getting in trouble than the fate of his son. That night I sat down to a scotch and wept a little for that poor toddler, and it duck and hit home pretty hard. Never saw that guy again. Never heard what happened, if anything. I mean, we hope that justice will prevail, but all you can do is make your statement and trust that something was done. It's not as bad as some of the stuff here, but my sister-in-law always threatens to leave a place unless her kid behaves. But she has never followed through on her threat once. So her kid knows nothing will happen. For example, they'll be at our house, and he won't sit down to eat his supper. She tells him to sit and eat or they'll leave. She will literally say this 20 times. She'll even say, "Okay, son's name. I'm getting up and we're going." Still no reaction. Then son's name. "I'm putting on my boots." Still nothing. Eventually she gives up. He doesn't eat his supper and they don't leave. This happens every time I see them. So he never behaves and she has him going to a psychiatrist to figure out why. I'm the opposite with my kids. There are times they don't even get warnings. We were at a park to watch fireworks a few weeks ago when my 6-year-old hit me twice in the groin because she got angry at something. I packed her up in the car and went home and put her straight to bed. She missed out on the fireworks while her sister and cousins got to stay up later. Don't make threats if you are not going to follow through on them. Probably a father verbally berating his son, around 11-12, about asking for something. Like he would not let up about how this kid was such a selfish little bastard. His words: "This kid was trailing behind him, obviously humiliated. crying while the dad just kept up telling him how awful he was. Felt bad for the kid. A few people stopped him and told him to let up, and he just got all "don't tell me how to talk to my kid" and stormed out. It was at a Kohl's in the mall, so nobody could get the information on him. It was just really sad. An after-school care parent of a 12-year-old figured out it was me that called CPS. After threatening me in my office, she proceeded to beat her daughter upside the head on their way down the stairs, declaring that no one would stop her from hitting her child. Of course I called CPS again, as well as one of the fitness instructors downstairs to intervene. I was in the supermarket once when this man walks past, with his kid trailing behind him. I guess the kid would have been about 4 or 5 years of age. He calls out to his father, "Dad, we need noodles." To which dad replied, "We've already got noodles, you dumb duck." Definitely one of those "did I seriously just hear that right?" moments. This takes place about 10 years ago. I was at a crowded nail salon getting my nails did. A rather large woman had a baby in a stroller. Little girl was maybe 2 years old. The fumes had to be bothering her, as it was giving my teenage self a headache. She was fussy, crying, kept throwing her sippy cup off the edge of the tray. Her mom was completely ignoring her, puffing and puffing as she'd pick up the sippy cup and drop it back on the stroller tray. At some point, the mom had had enough, and so that she wouldn't mess up her new 3 inches acrylics, open hand whacked the baby on the top of her head. I swear, the entire salon went silent. Every single eye was on them. The little girl held her breath for what seemed like an eternity, then let out a blood-curdling scream. The mom just calmly but quickly stood up, grabbed her stuff in the stroller, and walked out without paying. Everyone seemed stunned by what just happened. I don't remember what happened after that, but it was horrifying. I was driving behind a small sedan once that was packed, driver, front passenger, and 3 in the back. We stopped at a red light and I was just waiting for the light to change back when an infant, 9 months by my guess, crawled up over the shoulder of the middle passenger into the rear window, looked me in the eye, and smiled. The light changed soon after and they drove off with the baby just chilling there. I'm still ashamed I was too stunned to think to get the license plate number and report it to the police. This isn't particularly public, but sort of. My next door neighbors are a couple who have 4 kids and 1 foster child. The foster child is 12 but severely autistic. Because of this, he is constantly coming to our door and our other neighbors' doors, ringing the bell, and asking if he can come inside. Usually to see our pets or ask to play with toys. He does this all throughout the day, up to 10 times a day. Not only is it annoying to us and the other neighbors, but it's dangerous. He could so easily knock on the wrong door one day and be abducted. The dad is at work all day, but the mom claims that she's always home and always watching the kids. She's home, yes, but she spends all day in bed and is never watching any of the kids. It's really sad. I was on holiday a bit back there and was in this market. A child that was about 6 or 7 years old lifted a postcard and wouldn't put it down when the dad asked. Then out of the blue the dad loses his sheet and slaps the child so hard the child starts screaming immediately at the top of his lungs and falls to the ground holding his head. I genuinely felt ill and full of anger after watching it. When I worked at a grocery store, there was a regular who would come in with her 3 kids. Usually the older kids weren't bad and rarely caused a scene, but the youngest, about 3-4 years old, was the worst. Every single time she would come up to check out, the youngest would start asking for candy. She would tell him no and that he needed to eat real food first before candy was allowed. Of course, he would start wailing so loudly that the whole store could hear and she would ignore him. This would go on for about 2-3 minutes and then he would beg her for candy again. She would say no just like she did before, but on this particular trip he actually started throwing things out of the cart. She smacked him on the hand and told him to stop behaving that way, and then he actually hit her back. She yelled at him and told him that she would spank him if he didn't calm down, and he cried some more for a few minutes. Once I was done ringing her up, I told her the total and guess what happened? She bought the ducking candy bar and gave it to him. Does it count if the child was unborn at the time? A girl I know fell pregnant at 15. And I saw her on multiple occasions drinking and smoking while 6+ months pregnant. And a mutual friend told me she was still doing drugs too. Another time, I saw a woman and her baby daddy, I assume, at like 9 in the morning drinking methylated spirits straight from the bottle in a packed McDonald's. Then she went outside and started smoking. At a fast food place for lunch, there is a huge 300+ pound woman with her daughter who is about 6 years old. The daughter is not fat, maybe plump, and eating straight butter. One pat of butter after another. The mother stops her and says, "Do you feel sick?" Daughter says no. The mother says, "Okay then. But once you feel sick you should stop. Pretty sure the kid will not grow up healthy." I saw a lady leave her kids on a leash outside an ice cream shop. I mean, my parents had me on a leash when I was little because I was a little sheet who wouldn't hold hands. That's the right way to use a child leash. Your child is not a dog. You do not leave them tied to a bench. The point of child leashes is to keep kids safe while they can get some independence. Not to be a neglectful idiot with a pet toddler. I had to wear a leash as a toddler as well because I didn't want to hold hands and was a master escape artist. One time my dad tied me to a pole or bench. I don't really remember what. So he could pay for something. About 5 seconds after he tied me up, I got free and went towards a highway. I was restricted to strollers and carts until I was at least 5-6 years old after that. This one stupid guy, during Christmas season, was in the store with his 5-year-old and they were standing next to the ornament tree, like a metal skeleton in the shape of a Christmas tree, but empty on the inside. His kid crawled under the tree and somehow ended up inside the tree. Now this tree has a green bin at the bottom because sometimes ornaments will drop if tugged too hard or mishandled. Most of which are made of glass. But when it does it'll fall into this bin to avoid getting glass shards everywhere. We just have to sweep it up daily. So this kid is like playing in this green bin with glass shards. I only noticed because the kid picked up one of our fully glass ornaments and dropped it, breaking it immediately. I rushed over to him and asked if the kid was okay. The dad, looking at his phone the whole time, glanced up towards me and then looked at his kid and mumbled, "Don't touch anything," to his kid while I got his kid out and sternly said, "This is dangerous. Never crawl under there. Okay?" And then they walked away without so much of an apology. And while his dad was still looking at his ducking phone, I never wanted to kick someone in the face so badly. My dad, who was not the most patient of people, asked me to check the batteries on a camera we had used on an outing to the zoo with my 2 little brothers as we were driving back home. He had never taught me how to operate, change film, or anything on that old camera. I accidentally popped open the film drawer. My dad lost it. He screamed, "You ruined the pictures of the boys." And he full on backfisted me while driving. I remember angrily closing the flap I had opened and fumbling around for napkins as blood poured out of my nose. My dad had finally looked at me when we pulled in home and he looked at my bloody shirt and swollen face and said, "Sorry. I got carried away and shouldn't have done that," as we walked into the apartment. Whenever anyone yells at their children and makes them cry, it makes me feel very awkward. Like, I get that they might be little sheets, but publicly humiliating them by yelling at them around a bunch of strangers makes things worse and traumatizes them. If anything, I remember as a kid if I pissed my parents off in public they would say, "We'll deal with this when we get home," which was way more scary than getting yelled at. A mother threw her soda at her 7-year-old in an ER waiting room for talking too much. This was after she shit in the waiting room. She didn't have diarrhea and actually shit her pants. She stood up, said she had to poop, took off her pants, popped and squat and shit. Was at a stock show. Kid with a sheep in the ring with her dad on the other side of the fence telling her she was showing like shit and berating her for not being able to perform how he'd like her to. She was sobbing in tears in front of about 500 people just in the building, and the show was being live streamed all over the country. I tried to help her from across the ring, but she was too distracted by her piece of shit dad. I was riding the bus a few weeks ago and the woman sitting beside me turned to her daughter and started screaming at her for looking at the other passengers because people will stab you for looking at them in public. My mother beat me so hard with a wooden spoon that it broke. Didn't help that I was crying the whole time. Then she got a metal spoon. When I got dropped off at my dad's house 2 days later and I wouldn't sit at the dinner table, he was pissed. I told him why, and it was the first time in my life I'd seen him cry. Leaving children unattended in a scatter park. Exacerbated more so when they aren't correctly using the facility, running around with no board, gear, etc. Don't have the skill. The old classic is a little dude riding an on BMX bike up a ramp, but he doesn't know how to turn around, so ends up nutting himself. Or can't comprehend the norms of using the space, ignoring queuing, dropping in on people, getting in the way, hogging an area. The list goes on. The rate at which this happens, the risk of serious bodily injury, and the near universal incredulousness from the parent when confronted is baffling.